Good day everyone. So today I'm going to discuss to you about the proportion and emphasis. So for introduction, proportion refers to the dimensions of a composition and relationship between height, width, and depth. How proportion is used will affect how realistic and stylized something seems. Proportion also describes how the size of different parts of piece of art or design related to each other, while emphasis is art and is one of several principles of art, which are utilized alongside the elements of art. The latter is described as your visual tools, and they comprise color, form, line, shape, space, texture, and values. It is important not to confuse with the elements and principles of art, the latter of which use the elements to create a unified composition. So now let's proceed to the definition of proportion. So what is proportion? Proportion is the art principle that shows the pleasing relationship between a whole and its part and between the parts themselves. It can be achieved through the proper arrangement of space divisions. Proportions are generally expressed in terms of ratios. The Parthenon. The Parthenon is a building in Athens, Greece. It's considered the most perfectly proportioned architectural structure in the world. So the Parthenon is one of the example of proportioned architectures in the world. So there are three aspects of proportion. First is proportion in the groupings of objects. Second is proportion in space division. And lastly is proportion in scales. Proportion is established when two or more objects are placed near or adjacent to each other. An arrangement or groupings of objects may show good or bad proportion. In arranging objects, it is more pleasing to group three objects with another three, or two objects with three, than two objects with two or two with four. It is because odd numbers are more interesting than even numbers. Very small objects should not be grouped with very large ones, otherwise they will be out of proportion. Harmony of size is the same as good proportion. The next one is emphasis. So emphasis is the principle of art which tends to carry the eyes from the center of interest or dominant part of any composition to the less important or subordinate parts. So the most essential factor in emphasis is simplicity. This is the guiding principle of Greek and Japanese arts. There is no dominance without subordination and no subordination without dominance. So, therefore, it is vice versa. The answers to the question what things should be emphasized depends upon the artist's purpose. It may be the outline, form, color, texture, size, idea, or value of an object. The least thing that should be emphasized in any arrangement or composition is the background. Hence, it must be plain and should not be more conspicuous than the other objects placed before it. Now, let's move on to the methods of emphasizing objects. So, there are three methods in emphasizing objects. The first one is by arrangement or grouping of objects. If objects are grouped, the one to be emphasized should be located at the center and the biggest and brightest in color. Number 2, by decoration. Objects which have decorations are given more emphasis than those without them. Number 3, and the last, by color contrast. Contrasting colors such as the complementary combinations and the triads are more emphatic than the analogous or any other related harmonies. Hues of great intensities are more noticeable than those having lower intensities. The use of contrasting values makes one value more dominant than the other. So, proportion is largely about the relationship of the size of one element when compared to another. When drawing or painting realistically, proportion is important. If the proportions are incorrect, then the resulting image will look less realistic or abstracted. Alternatively, artists can use proportion for effect, while emphasis is used in art to attract the viewer's attention to a particular area or object. This is typically the focal point or main subject of the artwork. For instance, in a portrait painting, the artist usually wants you to see the person's face first. On the other hand, emphasis is the part of the design that catches the viewer's attention. Usually, the artist will make one area stand out by contrasting it with other areas. The area could be different in size, color, texture, shape, or etc. Movement is the path the viewer's eye takes through the work of art, often to focal areas. So, that's all about my report about emphasis and proportion. Thank you for listening.